A long time ago, in a school called Karasuno, there was a volleyball player who was very doggy, because despite being short, he was very skilled. He could face the biggest ones, and for this reason they called him the Little Giant. The fact is that a boy named Hinata ended up admiring him when he watched one of his games on TV, and for this reason he decides to join the volleyball club of his school. But the problems begin, because it turns out that there was not a single member in that club, and poor Hinata had to train alone, although from time to time he asked help from people from another club to raise the ball. One day he signed up for a tournament and asked the guys from other clubs for help to complete the team. They faced a team in which Kageyama was, who was the prodigy armorer of the opposite team. But he was very egocentric. And if you don't know what an armorer is, it's practically the one who places the ball and makes the moves so that the team notes points. Hinata jumped and moved quickly, but even so they lost the game. He told Kageyama that he would beat him when they passed to the preparatory, and that's how they became rivals. Hinata trained and trained, until he entered the preparatory, and as he admired the Little Giant, he entered the Karasuno school. But when he arrived at the volleyball field, he ended up meeting Kageyama. The fact is that being from the same school, they could not face each other as they had promised, but the grudge was still kept, so the captain of the club forbids them to train until they get along. But since they did not want to do it, to allow them to be part of the team, they have to beat two other new members in a 3-against-3 game. So a ball ends up being in their team, and the captain, on the contrary, Kageyama did not even want to pass the ball to Hinata. He told him that he will pass it when he proves that it is useful. But then they are bothered by the boys with whom they should face, Tsukishima, who only plays without motivation. They bother Kageyama remembering his past, in which he was like a dictator, and they all left him alone for his difficult attitude and passes to finish off. The game begins, but at first they were out of sync and they were doing very badly. But it is a coincidence that due to the speed and jumps of Hinata, they almost managed to score with a super fast attack, and although it was impossible for it to happen again, they tried again until it started to work. They end up winning the game and give them their team uniforms. Immediately, the teacher in charge of the team arrives and tells them that Ayaba Josai, one of the 4 best teams in the prefecture, accepted to play a practice match with them. But the only condition is that Kageyama is the armorer throughout the game. Poor guy called Suga. They took his place as team armorer. When the day of the game arrived, Hinata was very nervous, because when the former teammates of Kageyama's team arrived, they told Hinata that he would get rid of him if he played badly. For that reason, they lost the first set. But seeing that Kageyama did not intend to harm him, he regained confidence and they began to use the fast attack, which made them do quite well in the second set. Everything was going well until a guy named Oikawa arrived. That guy quickly paired the score with some very powerful shots that were thrown, but when they managed to lift the ball, they used their master play again and ended up winning the game. Oikawa tells them that he will teach them his true power until next time. But the guys from Karasuno have to prepare for a tournament, and in order for them to have opportunities to win, they need a libero and a star striker. But that will not be a problem, because the libero returns to the club after his suspension due to a problem he had. The libero is called Nishinoya, and although he is short, he has very good ability to save the ball. Although for now he does not want to officially return, because the star of the team had left the club, and since they wanted both to return, Hinata and Kageyama try to convince him. The star is called Asahi, and although he looks like a bad boy, he actually left the club because he had a game in which they blocked all his shots, and he felt all the blame. The club's head coach managed to contact the coach of a team called Nekoma to have a training match. That team had a rivalry with Karasuno in the time of the Little Giant, and in the same way, the teacher managed to get the coach's grandson Yukai to train the team, because his grandfather was the one who led the team to glory a long time ago. But it is a coincidence that Asahi was passing by and they end up forcing him to train. While he was playing, he was remembering how much he liked to be on the team, and seeing that the rest of the players believed in him, he regained his confidence, just like he officially returned to the team. And after a lot of training, the day of the match against Nekoma came. Remembering the rivalry that both teams had, the battle in the garbage dump, crows against cats. Although in reality both teams never faced each other in the nationals, because they ended up in different sections or they ended up eliminating one. The practice match begins, and in Nekoma's team was a boy named Kenma, who is the brain of the team, because despite being very discouraged, he is also very observant, who even managed to create a plan to stop the fast attack. In his past, he was not social at all, and he did not like to get tired in a physical way, but it was because of one of his friends who ended up joining the volleyball club, resulting in being quite good at predicting the movements of his rival. The match went on, and they even tried to modify their attacks to be able to score. But even so, Nekoma had more experience, and he loses the one that lets the ball fall. Karasuno lost the practice match, but it helped him to gain experience, just like they revived the flames of his rivalry. Hinata becomes friends with Kenma. Tanaka the Bold becomes friends with a player who looks like him. A tournament called Haikyuu is approaching, where they will be able to face other teams officially and not only in practice. That was a possibility for them to face Nekoma and Ayaba Jasai, but for that they would have to win the first games. So they began to train harder and harder, that until one day before the tournament, the team's manager, called Kyoko, ended up encouraging them so that they would not be nervous, reminding them that even though they are called fallen crows, they must fly. The tournament begins, and the first team they have to face is Tokonami, but from the beginning they proved that they were not going to lose. They will fly again. And so they were scoring point after point. They easily ended up winning, but now they have to face a team called Datiko, also known as the Iron Wall, since they have an impenetrable defense, and it is the same team that managed to block all of Asahi's attacks. Starting the game, they were stopping all of their attacks, so it was time to use the essential weapon, the super fast attacker of Hinata and Kageyama, so they were easily pairing the score again. Although little by little the opposite team began to get used to it, so they managed to block a fast attack. But Karasuno will not be allowed to win, because they also open the way to the star of the team, making everyone regain their confidence among themselves. They win the first set, and when the second one begins, both were very even. After some blocks, lifts, finishes and saves, Karasuno wins again by staying in the tournament. Meanwhile, Datiko promised that he would win later. The next day they face Ayaba Yasai, the moment to see the true skills of Oikawa as the armor of his team has arrived, and we have to accept it. At first they beat Karasuno. Kageyama wanted to defeat Oikawa, since if he did, he would become the best armor in the prefecture. But as the opposite team began to decipher Karasuno's strategies, Kageyama began to rush, reason why they take him out of the field, so that he can calm down and observe the opponent's plays. Meanwhile, they put Suga as an armorer to keep the atmosphere cool. He was doing very well, since his tactic was focused on accommodating the ball in a way that the finishers act 100%. Kageyama realizes that, and when he returns to the field, he knows that he should no longer rush, as he should have confidence in his team. He quickly began to change his attitude, which he even tried to smile, celebrate points, and even praise his teammates, so that everyone trust him, taking out his potential. It turns out that in the past, both went to the same school and played in the same position, but Oikawa began to be afraid that they would take his place as an armorer, which even once became violent against Kageyama. That was the beginning of the rivalry between both, returning to the game. Everyone is very excited and Yamaguchi, well, he is there. On the bench or not, the problems begin, because Ayaba Jasai was scoring more points. Then the coach, to change the atmosphere of the game, put Yamaguchi on the field, because it turns out that he was practicing with a friend of the coach to dominate a floated throw, which is practically that the ball becomes difficult to lift. But poor Yamaguchi, his throw failed. Meanwhile, the whole team gets ready, using Hinata as the bait for excellence. But after many finishes, saves and overcoming their limits, they end up losing the game. Yes, 24 chapters to see a team lose. Everyone is frustrated and they are going to eat some taquitos to vent. When they return to school, those in the third year decide to continue doing the club activities to participate in the spring tournament, which would be their last tournament before they enter a university. And as everyone wants to step on the stage where the little giant was, they start training to be at the level of the strongest teams. But here the first season ends.